Hello, wonderful fifth grade artists. I hope you are well. Hope you're enjoying this extended break. I sure miss seeing you all. Each week I'll be sending you a video sharing the project we would be working on if we were in the classroom. So this week we will be looking at a local artist, an Oregon watercolor artist named Susan Lucky Hidgen. And we're so fortunate in Oregon that we have unlimited inspiration, right? We've got the mountains, we've got the ocean, we've got the forests, and Susan hits them all. So the wonderful thing about a landscape when you're creating it is that it sort of gives an artist all the challenges. And what I mean by that is we've got our foreground, our middle ground, our background. We have an opportunity to create texture, an opportunity to experiment with value and color. It's just an opportunity for all of the things as an artist that you're working on. In this particular painting, there's a great use of light. So this is, again, it's an illusion, it's flat, right? But it looks like we can go into it, and the artist has done a great job of creating the water light right here by just changing the value. So we're going to create our own watercolor masterpiece. So a couple notes about that. If you do not have watercolors at home, if your watercolors say are at school in the classroom and you can't get to them, please email me and I'm happy to drop some off for you. Most of the projects I'll be sending this next few weeks, I've tried to just use pencils and markers, but I wanted to share this one with you because I think it has a lot of different things that you could experiment with outside this landscape. And so again, if you need some, I was able to get a few from our classroom and I have them at home and I'm happy to just drop them on your porch in a bag. So we're going to create a landscape similar to this. And for this project, in addition to watercolors, you'll need some things you might have laying around the house, which are some gauze. This is just things that you would use if you were fixing a wound or if you're wrapping your finger or toe or something in for an injury. Wax paper, which is just the stuff we use for baking, and then some saran wrap and some salt. And these different things that I just showed you are going to be used to create different texture. So the first thing I did is I want to draw a quick outline of my landscape. You can do whatever landscape obviously that you want. So if you want to include mountains or the ocean, but the thing that you need to include in order to create the illusion of an actual landscape is you need to have something in your foreground, something in your middle ground, something in your background. So you don't just like want a tree and like a rock, right? You want to create layers. So we saw in Susan's work that when you're looking out into nature, like if you're just standing in the park or the mountains or ocean, there are many, many things going on. If you're by the water, you've got the water, and then what's around the water, and then past the rocks, you've got trees and maybe a mountain. It's really endless what you have. So you need to think about what you will have in all those components. For this project, the white paper you use, the heaviest paper you have, that's the one you want to use. Now, if all you have is copy paper, which is sometimes what I only have at home, it's going to be fine. But what you need to do is you need to be aware that it's going to wrinkle, which actually happens to the heavy paper in our classroom too. But then I just put it under heavy encyclopedias and I flatten it out. So if as you're working on it, your paper wrinkles, let it dry, put it under some heavy books and start it again the next day. Super easy problem to solve. So once you've done your initial sketch, you're ready to start painting. And so what we're going to do is I did several different things. I'm just going to show you those techniques. So the first thing I did is on my water, I did something that we've done in class before, and it's a really easy one, which is just to resist. And what I mean by that is I took a pastel or a crayon, works just as well for that. And right in the water, I just made some dark lines with the white pastel. So you probably can't even see this in the video, but you'll see it in a second. So I'm just making some lines. And then with my watercolor, I'm going to create a resist. So as you know, when I go over those pastel lines, they're going to show through just like they're doing now. So you can see that as I paint over it, the lines that I created in the water with the pastel are being resisted by the paint. And that initially, right off the get-go, creates a different texture, a different look. And that is what you're seeing in my finished product here. So I did the white pastel and then I painted my my water. The next part I did was I did my rocks. And so what I did, I'm just going to go right over, is I did my brown. So I filled it in, and I used, I kind of did the trick where I am doing different shades of brown. So some areas I'm going to put a lot of paint, and some areas I'm going to put less, because a rock is often many different colors of one color. So the gray or brown or whatever you want to do. Now, remembering in watercolor, I know you know this, but just as a reminder, your brush is best if it's vertical and it's like a ballerina on their toes, in there swirling around. That's how you're going to get the greatest amount of paint. And then if you do want it really watery, obviously that's how you'd use more water. So once I had an area painted like that, this is where I used my wax paper. So I just took some wax paper and I ripped it into pieces, and I laid it on top of the wetness. And then what happens is I leave it on there until it's dry. So watercolor dries very quickly. I mean, you could do it overnight, you can do it in an hour or so. When it dries and you pull it off, that's how I got this texture that is a little swirly, because what happened is, as the paint dries, this water wax paper that's attached to it has its own lines, and that literally dries into it, so you get that interesting shape. So that's for the rocks. For the trees, I'm doing some Big Surprise green. And then once my tree is all green, that's where the gauze comes in. So what I did is I took my gauze, and I'm actually gonna cut a little bit smaller piece. This I found, I tried a few different ways on this. I found that it was best, initially I thought I should crumple it and just squish it on, but I found that the gauze has its own interesting texture, right? It's sort of a web texture in there. So all I'm doing is I'm laying it on there. And you want to make sure there's enough water so it's going to stick a bit. And then I just let it dry. And then when you pull it off, you can see actually already it gives you that interesting pattern from the gauze. So I've got my wax paper, I've got my gauze, and then for my sky, I'm going to do a little bit of paint on here. And we've done this before in class at different points, and that's the salt. And I'm just gonna sprinkle a little bit of salt right on there. And this is just regular salt that I grabbed from the kitchen. I'm gonna sprinkle that on, and I'm gonna let that dry. And this is the same technique we use when we need to get our roads de-iced. The salt is gonna break down that water, and it absorbs it, and it's going to absorb the water in a different way. So all these little speckles that you can kind of see in the video, you're gonna have that different texture from the salt. You let that dry, and then brush the salt off, and you'll have that. And then the last thing I did for the different patches of water is, in addition to the pastel, I just did a few sections of plastic. So I took this plastic wrap, and for this I did sort of crumple it, and I would just lay it on there and let it dry. And once it dries, I pull it off, and then it gives me these different textures. So once all of these things were dry, all the textures were done, I came back and I used crayons or oil pastels to add another layer of color. So you can see my trees that have the interesting gauze pattern. I also am doing my pastels to add another color. I could blend this down here. My rocks, I went back and I highlighted with another shade of brown, and then I outlined them in black, so I could use this to create another layer. The pastels, as you know, can be used to create different shades of the color, and I also think you can use it to add form. So again, making the rocks look like they can be picked up. Remember, form is one of our elements of art. That means we are trying to make it look 3D. Form is something you can walk around. So we want these rocks to appear that we could pick them up and grab them. So you can use the pastels to highlight those and outline them to create that effect. You could do the same in the water with the pastels, going back with some different shades of blue to create a lot of interest in that. So a lot of different techniques in here, a very open-ended project, but I think, I hope that you'll enjoy experimenting with them because you can create a beautiful landscape of your choice wherever you love to go using those different techniques with things you have around. Once again, if you don't have watercolors, send me an email and I will happily drop them off. If you have any other questions, please email me and I'll get back to you. Hope you enjoy. I'll hope to see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.